The rain fell hard that night, but it wasn't loud enough to drown out the sound of Sarah's voice. "Get out." Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the living room, soaked from the rain he had just walked through to get home. His hands trembled slightly, but not from the cold, from the words that had just shattered everything. Sarah stood near the door, arms crossed, her expression colder than the storm outside. "You heard me," she said again, her voice sharp. "I'm done carrying a useless man." Marcus slowly lifted his eyes and looked at her. For 7 years, this had been his wife, the woman he believed loved him, the woman he sacrificed everything for. And now she was throwing him out like he was nothing. But what Sarah didn't know was that the man she was humiliating tonight owned the company she proudly bragged about working for. And before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel around the world. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Crowned Tales for more unforgettable stories of betrayal, revenge, and shocking truths. Now, let's go back to how all of this began. 7 years earlier, Marcus lived a very different life. He was quiet, observant, and incredibly intelligent. But what made him different from most people wasn't just his intelligence. It was patience. Marcus believed in watching people, understanding them, learning who they really were when no one was looking. Because people always revealed their true character eventually. The problem was, most people realized the truth too late. Marcus had built something extraordinary, a powerful technology company that had grown faster than anyone expected. But unlike many wealthy founders, Marcus never wanted fame. He hated attention. So when the company exploded in success, he did something unusual. He stepped back from the spotlight. The ownership stayed under his control. But the public leadership was handled quietly behind layers of corporate structure. Very few people knew who truly owned the company. And Marcus intended to keep it that way, because wealth had a way of attracting the wrong people. Then he met Sarah. It was a rainy afternoon when they first crossed paths. Sarah was vibrant, ambitious, and full of energy. She worked hard, spoke confidently, and had dreams of building a powerful career. Marcus liked that about her. She wasn't afraid of success. And for the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to live a simple life. He never told Sarah about his company. Instead, he let her believe he was just an ordinary man working small freelance jobs. It was peaceful that way. At least in the beginning. They dated for 2 years before getting married. At first, Sarah didn't care about money, or at least that's what Marcus believed. They laughed together, cooked cheap dinners together, dreamed together. But dreams change when success enters the picture. 3 years into their marriage, Sarah landed a job at a rapidly growing company. She was proud of it, excited, ambitious. The company was expanding quickly, offering opportunities for promotions and big salaries. She worked longer hours, talked more about status, about climbing the corporate ladder, about success. Marcus listened quietly every night as she spoke about her job, because the company she was so proud of was his. But Sarah didn't know that, and Marcus never corrected her. At first it amused him, listening to her complain about management decisions he had personally approved, listening to her praise strategies he had secretly designed. But slowly, something else began to change. Sarah started comparing Marcus to other men, successful men, ambitious men, men who drove expensive cars, men who wore tailored suits, men who talked about investments and promotions. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed ordinary, too ordinary, and that started to bother her. "You're too comfortable," Sarah once told him during dinner. Marcus looked up calmly. "Comfortable? Yes," she said with frustration. "You don't push yourself." Marcus smiled gently. "I push myself every day." Sarah shook her head. "You don't even have a stable job." Marcus didn't respond because explaining the truth would have changed everything, and he wasn't ready for that. Months passed. Sarah's salary increased. Her confidence grew, and so did something darker. Disrespect. Small comments at first. Little insults disguised as jokes. You wouldn't understand corporate pressure. You've never handled real responsibility. Some people are just meant to stay small. Marcus noticed every word, but he stayed quiet, watching, waiting, because patience always revealed the truth. Then Daniel entered the picture. Daniel was everything Marcus pretended not to be. Confident, loud, successful. He worked at the same company as Sarah, a senior manager. Sharp suits, luxury watches, expensive car. The kind of man who made an impression when he entered a room. Sarah talked about Daniel often. At first, it sounded professional, but Marcus could hear the admiration in her voice. "He's brilliant," she once said during dinner. Marcus nodded slowly. "Is he?" "Yes. He's probably going to become one of the top executives soon." Marcus knew something Sarah didn't. Daniel was ambitious, but dangerous. Marcus had already seen questionable decisions in Daniel's reports, but he hadn't acted yet. He was observing, the same way he observed everything. Weeks later, Marcus came home early one evening. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard laughter from the living room. Marcus walked slowly toward the sound and stopped. Sarah was sitting very close to Daniel on the couch. Their conversation ended instantly when Marcus entered the room. The silence was heavy. Daniel stood up quickly, adjusting his expensive jacket. "Oh," Daniel said awkwardly, "you must be Marcus." Marcus nodded calmly. "And you must be Daniel." Sarah crossed her arms defensively. "We were just discussing work." Marcus looked at both of them carefully. Then he smiled politely. "I see." Daniel cleared his throat. "I should probably go." Marcus stepped aside, allowing him to leave. But as Daniel walked past him, Marcus noticed something. The arrogance in Daniel's eyes. The quiet confidence of someone who believed he had already won. The door closed. The house fell silent again. Sarah turned toward Marcus with irritation. "You came home early." Marcus removed his coat slowly. "Yes," she sighed. "You could at least call before showing up." Marcus looked at her. Something inside him had shifted, but his voice remained calm. "It's my house, too." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Technically." Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he walked into the kitchen. But that night, Marcus began preparing something Sarah would never see coming, because patience had its limits, and Marcus had just reached his. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Sarah spent more time at work, more time with Daniel, more nights coming home late. The tension between her and Marcus became impossible to ignore. One evening, Marcus overheard a phone conversation. Sarah didn't realize he was standing in the hallway. "I can't stay with him forever," she whispered into the phone. Marcus's chest tightened. "He's holding me back," she continued. A pause. Then she laughed softly. "Yes, I know Daniel." Marcus closed his eyes, and in that moment, the truth finally revealed itself. But what Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had already started investigating Daniel, and what he found was far worse than simple betrayal. Daniel had been secretly manipulating company contracts, moving money, abusing his position, building power behind the scenes. And Sarah was unknowingly standing beside a man who was slowly destroying the company. Marcus sat alone in his study that night, looking at the evidence spread across his desk. Financial reports, hidden transactions, emails, everything Daniel thought he had buried. Marcus leaned back in his chair, quiet, calm, because now he understood everything. Sarah didn't respect Marcus. Daniel believed Marcus was weak, and both of them had no idea who Marcus really was. Then came the night everything exploded. The storm outside was violent. Thunder shook the windows. Marcus walked into the house and immediately felt the tension. Sarah was waiting, standing near the door, arms crossed. Angry, Daniel stood behind her, watching, smirking. Sarah didn't hesitate. "You need to leave." Marcus looked between them. "Why?" Sarah's voice rose. "Because I'm tired of pretending." Marcus stayed silent. Sarah stepped closer. "You're broke, Marcus. You have no ambition, no future. I deserve better." Marcus glanced at Daniel. Daniel shrugged with a smug smile. Sarah pointed toward the door. "Daniel helped me realize something." Marcus spoke quietly. "What's that?" "That I wasted 7 years of my life." The words hung in the air, cold. Final. Marcus slowly picked up his coat. He walked toward the door, but before stepping outside, he turned back and looked directly at Daniel. For the first time, Marcus smiled. Not the gentle smile Sarah knew, but something far colder, more dangerous. Daniel frowned slightly. Marcus spoke calmly. "Tomorrow morning." He paused. Don't be late for work." Daniel laughed. "What?" Marcus opened the door. The storm roared outside. Then Marcus said something that made Daniel's smile disappear. Because tomorrow, Marcus's eyes moved to Sarah. "The real owner of your company will be there." And neither of them had any idea that Marcus had already prepared something that would destroy Daniel and change Sarah's life forever. Daniel's smile slowly faded. For the first time that night, the confidence in his eyes flickered. "What did you just say?" Daniel asked. Marcus stood in the doorway as rain poured behind him, his silhouette framed by flashes of lightning. "I said," Marcus repeated calmly, "don't be late for work tomorrow." Sarah scoffed. "Marcus, stop being dramatic." But Marcus didn't answer her. His eyes remained locked on Daniel. A long, uncomfortable silence filled the room. Then Marcus stepped outside. The door closed behind him. Sarah shook her head in irritation. "He's unbelievable," she muttered. Daniel forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. "He's just bitter," Daniel said. But something about Marcus's final words lingered in his mind. "The real owner of your company will be there." Daniel knew the company had a hidden majority shareholder. Very few people knew who it was. But Marcus, there was no way. Daniel pushed the thought aside. He's bluffing, Daniel said confidently. Sarah nodded. Of course he is. Still, neither of them slept well that night. The next morning, the company headquarters buzzed with unusual tension. Employees whispered in small groups. Rumors moved quickly through the building. Something big was happening. Sarah noticed it the moment she walked through the glass doors. What's going on? She asked a colleague. The colleague looked nervous. Didn't you hear? Hear what? The owner is coming today. Sarah blinked. The owner? Yeah, the colleague said. The real one? Sarah frowned. The real owner had never visited the office before. No one had even seen him. But today, he was coming. And suddenly, Marcus's words from the night before echoed in her mind. Don't be late for work tomorrow. Sarah quickly shook the thought away. Marcus couldn't possibly. No, impossible. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, looking tense but composed. You heard the news? Sarah asked. Daniel nodded. Yes. Do you think it's serious? Daniel adjusted his tie. It's probably just a formality. But even as he said it, Daniel's mind raced. Because if the owner had decided to visit personally, it meant something was wrong, very wrong. At exactly 10 a.m., an email was sent to every employee. Mandatory company meeting. Main conference hall. Sarah and Daniel walked in with hundreds of others. The room buzzed with curiosity. Executives stood near the stage whispering nervously. Then the doors at the back opened, and the room went silent. Several senior board members entered first. Behind them, a tall figure stepped into the room, calm, confident, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. Sarah's heart stopped. Marcus. Gasps spread across the room. Daniel froze. Marcus walked slowly toward the stage, his expression calm and unreadable. But he looked nothing like the man Sarah had thrown out the night before. This Marcus carried authority. Power! The room watched in stunned silence as he stepped onto the stage. One of the board members approached the microphone. Good morning, everyone. No one spoke. The board member gestured toward Marcus. I'd like to introduce the majority owner and founder of this company. He paused. Marcus. The entire room erupted into shocked whispers. Sarah's legs felt weak. No, she whispered. Daniel's face turned pale. Marcus stepped forward and took the microphone. He looked out over the crowd. His gaze slowly moved across the room until it landed on Sarah, then Daniel. Marcus spoke calmly. Good morning. The room was silent again. For years, I stayed out of the spotlight. I believed a company should be judged by its work, not by the person behind it. He paused. But recently, I discovered something that forced me to step forward. Marcus pressed a button on a remote. A large screen behind him lit up. Financial documents appeared. Contracts. Transaction records. Daniel's breathing became shallow. Marcus continued. These documents show a pattern of financial manipulation inside this company. Whispers filled the room. Marcus zoomed in on a specific name. Daniel. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Marcus's voice remained calm. Millions of dollars were moved through unauthorized contracts. Another document appeared. Personal accounts. Another. Hidden transactions. Sarah stared at the screen in horror. Daniel suddenly stood up. This is ridiculous, he shouted. All eyes turned toward him. Marcus looked down at him calmly. Is it? Daniel pointed angrily. You're manipulating the data. Marcus didn't react. Instead, he pressed another button. The screen changed again. Security footage appeared. Daniel, meeting with shady contractors, private conversations, secret agreements. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel's voice cracked. "You can't prove anything." Marcus tilted his head slightly. Actually, another recording began playing. Daniel's own voice filled the room, discussing illegal profits, kickbacks, bribes. The room exploded with outrage. Security guards immediately began moving toward Daniel. Daniel looked around desperately. Then his eyes landed on Sarah. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "You knew about this?" Sarah's eyes widened. "What?" "You knew he owned the company." Sarah shook her head in panic. "I didn't." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that?" Two security guards grabbed Daniel's arms. He struggled. "This isn't over," Daniel shouted. Marcus watched silently as Daniel was dragged out of the room. The doors slammed shut. The room slowly settled. Marcus looked back at the employees. "Integrity matters," he said simply. "If you build success through dishonesty, it eventually collapses." The meeting ended shortly after. Employees slowly left the room, still stunned, but Sarah couldn't move. She remained frozen in her chair. Her mind replayed everything: Marcus, the company, the truth, the humiliation, the regret. Finally, Marcus stepped down from the stage. Their eyes met across the room. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Sarah slowly walked toward him. Her voice trembled. "Marcus." Marcus waited calmly. I didn't know." Marcus studied her carefully. "Didn't know what?" "That you," her voice cracked, "that you owned everything." Marcus nodded slightly. "Yes, you didn't know." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "If I had known," Marcus gently raised a hand. "That's exactly the point." She stopped speaking. Marcus's voice remained quiet, but firm. "You didn't respect me when you believed I had nothing." Sarah began crying. "I made a mistake." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Everyone makes mistakes." Hope flickered in her eyes. "But some mistakes," Marcus continued softly, "reveal who we really are." Sarah's hope faded. Marcus stepped past her and walked toward the exit. She turned quickly. "Marcus, please!" He stopped. But he didn't turn around. Sarah whispered through tears, "Is there any chance we can fix this?" Marcus stood there silently for several seconds. Then he finally spoke. "You didn't just leave me." He paused. "You chose someone you believed had more power." Sarah couldn't respond. Marcus turned slightly. "For years, I believed love meant supporting someone no matter what." He looked at her one last time. "But love also requires respect." Sarah's tears fell harder. Marcus continued walking. But just before leaving the building, he stopped again and said something Sarah would never forget. True character appears when there's nothing to gain. The doors closed behind him, and just like that, Marcus walked out of her life forever. Months later, the company was stronger than ever. Daniel faced serious legal consequences. The corruption inside the company had been eliminated, and Marcus finally stepped into the role he had avoided for years. A respected leader, but more importantly, a wiser man. Because sometimes the most painful betrayals reveal the most important truths. And sometimes losing the wrong people is the greatest victory of all. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Would you have forgiven Sarah or walked away like Marcus?